What insider secrets does the company you work for not want its customers to find out? Story 1. I worked for 2 years at a call center for Cox Cable, doing tech support for internet and TV. It's more important for the techs to get you off the phone quickly than to actually resolve your problem. Don't blame the techs. Supervisors are constantly breathing down their necks, and those supervisors are under pressure because customers complain about being on hold for too long. When I worked there 3 years ago, calls were limited to 7.5 minutes. That time limit was all you got to take the customer's information, diagnose the problem, offer a solution, and wrap up the call. Not necessarily resolve the issue. If a call went over 7:30, a supervisor would immediately come over and demand an explanation. I got in trouble so many times for genuinely trying to help people. It was disgusting. One time I spent a good 30 minutes on the phone with an elderly gentleman in San Diego who was setting up his internet. He was slow and not very familiar with computers, but he was kind and patient. I did everything I could to help him and eventually got everything working. He was thrilled and even asked to speak to my supervisor to let them know how happy he was with my assistance. I was written up for that. Apparently, I had wasted time helping one person when I could have been fake helping many others. I've heard plenty of similar stories from people working at other cable companies or call centers they contract with. The truth is, for an inbound call center, the people in charge only care about clearing the call queue as quickly as possible, not about actually helping customers. No matter what scripted nonsense the techs are required to say, their hands are tied. Also, cable companies are losing TV customers at an alarming rate and will do anything to keep you from cutting your television service. If you threaten to leave and mention a competitor like Dish Network, they'll shower you with discounts. Don't just say, "I don't watch much TV." Be direct about competitors. Keep pushing until they flat out refuse to offer more. Then when those discounts end, cancel your service. Edit. Let me clarify. Good phone workers can balance their call times by ending easy calls quickly, which gives them more time for the complicated ones. The problem is, even if you have a solid average call time, supervisors will harass you if any single call runs too long. They'll pressure you to roll a truck to the customer's location, regardless of whether that's the best solution. The customer gets charged for the truck, which may not even solve their problem. This creates unnecessary stress for employees, especially newer ones, and undermines the entire purpose of a helpline. Story 2. I used to work for IBM. Within the company, it was common knowledge that all projects were significantly understaffed. This meant the employees assigned to those projects had to work incredibly hard, often putting in 80 hours a week instead of the standard 40. Since we were salaried employees, we didn't earn anything extra for all that overtime. IBM, on the other hand, profited greatly because most of our projects were billed as time and materials, essentially hourly. When some employees started complaining about the excessive overtime, IBM offered them the option to become hourly employees. This would mean they could get paid for every hour worked, but would lose access to benefits like healthcare and a 401k. For many, this change would more than double their salary, so a significant number of employees, about 95% of those given the option, chose to switch to hourly. Every single one of them was fired within a month. This decision caused even more chaos. Projects that were already understaffed became severely undermanned. Some were canceled, while others faced massive delays. IBM had essentially used those employees as an example of what happens if you complain too much. Story 3. The last job I had was at a family-owned steel supplier in the northeastern U.S. They carried I-beams, angles, flats, tubes, pipes, plates, and more. Their main service was prefabrication work, cutting materials to specific lengths. In some cases, particularly for government contracts, customers would require domestic material only. If the company didn't have domestic material in stock, they would have us grind off the heat numbers, codes that trace the material back to the manufacturing plant and its composition from foreign material, and sell it as domestic, complete with falsified mill certifications. This was a shady practice with potentially dire consequences. Edit. I should add that I can only confirm this happening twice, maybe 3 times, but I've tried to block out a lot from that place because of the lack of responsibility and ethics in management. The last few years working there were particularly bad. Edit 2. Many people are urging me to report this. If I knew then what I know now, I absolutely would. However, this happened 10 years ago, and I wouldn't even be able to recall the names of the customers or provide specific dates. I do remember a few details, like some pieces of square tubing, 4, 5, or 6 inches, and some cut I-beams, but most of the details are foggy. Story 4. You don't have to get a GED. It's just one type of high school equivalency test, but because the term GED has become synonymous with high school equivalency, people don't realize there are other options. Pearson, the company behind the GED, benefits from this misunderstanding because they can charge $120 per test, with most of that money going directly to them. What Pearson doesn't want you to know is that, depending on where you live, you might be able to take alternative tests like the HiSET or TASC, often for half the price or less. Until a few years ago, before Pearson got involved, the GED only cost $10 to $20 in most places. Edit. Not all colleges accept all forms of high school equivalency, and in some cases, the HiSET or TASC can be almost as expensive as the GED. It's a complicated system, and you'll need to do your research. Depending on where you live, you might be stuck with limited or expensive options. Additional context. For decades, the GED was dirt cheap because the people who needed it were often struggling financially. But when education giant Pearson took over, prices skyrocketed. One of the easiest ways to get rich in America, apparently, is by exploiting poor people. Story 5. At one point, I was really focused on switching jobs and thought teaching might be the right fit. Both of my parents were teachers, and I had a lot of connections at the school board. I also had some experience teaching at my previous job, so I figured I'd be a good candidate. Despite all this, I could barely get interviews. Every time I followed up, I heard the same response: the position's been filled. After a few months of trying, I gave up and decided to focus on the job I already had. Then out of nowhere, months later, I got a call from a woman at the school board. She wanted me to drop everything, become a teacher, and start that Monday. I think she called on a Thursday or Friday. Apparently, there was a teacher shortage, and the school board had just received federal funding. When I told her I'd have to think about it, it was sudden, and I'd need to give notice, she started to insult me, saying things like, "Well, I guess you're not really serious about being a teacher." The irony was laughable. I had been serious about it when I was going from school to school, begging for interviews and being ignored. But now this person wanted me to take the job without proper training or preparation and start in 2 days. I turned it down. I didn't need that kind of stress. Story 6. I used to work at a car dealership, and here's some advice. Don't buy a car the first time you step onto the lot. Negotiate the price of the new car before mentioning that you have a trade-in. Most people try to negotiate both at the same time, but here's what happens. When the sales manager approves giving you more money for your trade-in, they reduce the discount on the new car. This makes it look like you're getting a great deal on your trade-in, but you're really just paying more for the new car. Always ask for the on-the-road price. This is the total cost you'll pay, including all fees and taxes. Every dealership has different fees, and some are complete nonsense. For example, at our dealership, we charge an extra $400 for a sticker placed on different parts of the car to help trace it if it was stolen. Completely unnecessary. Dealerships want to sell cars from their current inventory. If the vehicle on the lot isn't exactly what you want, you have more negotiating power because they'll try to avoid bringing one in from another location. If you're buying a used car, ask how long it's been on the lot. If it just arrived, it's marked up significantly. At my dealership, prices would drop by $1,000 every couple of weeks until the car sold. Used cars also provide the most profit for the dealership, so be cautious when negotiating. The best time to buy a car is during 0% financing promotions, near Christmas, end of the year, or at the end of the month when dealerships are trying to meet quotas. Finally, avoid focusing solely on a low monthly payment. Sure, $150 a month sounds great, but if the loan term is over 8 years, you'll end up paying almost double the car's value. The shorter the loan term, the better the total cost. Story 7. When your flight gets canceled, it's not always due to weather. It's just as likely to be maintenance, staffing, or scheduling issues. However, airlines will code it as a weather cancellation to avoid paying for your hotel or meal vouchers. Edit. This seems to resonate with a lot of people, so let me clarify. First, please be kind to the gate agents. They're not the ones making the decisions, and they're often working for minimal pay while enduring hours of verbal abuse. Yelling at them is more likely to get you escorted out of the airport than to help your situation. I'm not a gate agent, and every airline has its own cancellation policies, so I can't provide specific advice on calling them out. My suggestion is to document everything. Weather reports, the timeline of delays, and any gate changes. Social media can also sometimes work wonders. No one who works in the airline industry likes the current state of things. While cheaper tickets are a positive, everything else like overcrowded flights, minimal legroom, and reduced amenities has made air travel worse. Remember, airline travel isn't guaranteed. Even when weather is genuinely the issue, it's often for your safety. Flying through a thunderstorm would result in turbulence far worse than most people have ever experienced. For better odds of reaching your destination, book flights a day early, fly in the morning, and allow plenty of time between connections. At least 2 hours, more for international trips. If it looks like your flight will be canceled, prioritize securing a hotel room or rental car before they sell out. Story 8. It's currently illegal in the U.S. to autodial a cell phone number from any equipment capable of autodialing, even in manual dial mode, without express written consent. If you receive such a call, get the company's name and address and have a lawyer send them a notice. You can often settle for a few $1,000s per incident. If you want to take this further, some people buy 50 phone lines from a high turnover carrier like Boost Mobile and wait for autodialers to call them. Then they sue every company that calls without permission. Edit, to clarify. There's a law separate from Do Not Call DNC laws that prohibits anyone from autodialing a cell phone using equipment capable of autodialing. This applies to businesses, even if there's a prior relationship. Unlike DNC laws, this rule has no exceptions. Some unethical call centers are difficult to track down, but agencies or collection companies are usually more transparent. If you record calls, ensure the company is aware you're recording, as not all states allow single-party consent. If a company calls you illegally, remind them, "You've just autodialed a cell phone without my written consent. May I have your company name and address?" Most will hang up and never call again. For persistent offenders, document everything and consult a lawyer to protect your rights and potentially receive compensation. Story 9. I work in market research and handle quality assurance. My job is to review the data our interviewers collect from respondents. I also edit the data to ensure it makes sense because some people give wild or nonsensical answers. Part of my role includes recoding responses and even replacing open-ended answers with what I feel is appropriate. When surveys end prematurely because the respondent hangs up, I complete them myself. I don't call the respondent back. I just fill in the answers however I want. We conduct surveys on a variety of topics, including political issues like upcoming elections, customer satisfaction, and research for colleges and universities. We even have an ongoing study that gathers data from people affected by the BP oil spill. Recently, we picked up a project for the IRS as well. This job has made me realize how important it is to scrutinize where data comes from and to question the honesty of the company responsible for collecting and validating it. Story 10. I work as a janitor, housekeeper at a veterinary clinic. Most of the time, things run smoothly, but on some days when 3 people call in sick and we're already understaffed, the animals suffer the consequences. One time a puppy died because no one was watching it in the incubator. Another puppy was crushed when its mother, left unsupervised in the same cage, accidentally rolled over onto it. Mistakes happen during procedures too. Once, someone miscalculated the amount of anesthetics for a pet undergoing oral surgery. The animal woke up during the procedure, bleeding from a clipped main artery, and nearly died while screaming in pain. The people working in the back are mostly interns who are still learning. Unfortunately, some of them end up being responsible for avoidable mistakes that cost pets their lives. Here's what I recommend. Always ask questions when you bring your pet in for a procedure. Document everything and keep copies of any reports or records about your pet. Take photos or videos of your pet's condition before and after the procedure. Get a lawyer in case the hospital messes up. It might save you a lot of stress if something goes wrong. Story 11. I'm a chemist, and throughout my education and career, I've seen that scientific fraud is alarmingly widespread. Even worse, there's little interest in addressing it. This makes me seriously doubt the validity of most scientific data. Fraud is shockingly easy to commit. Cherry-picking data can be as simple as ignoring a number you don't like or entering a different one entirely. When funding is involved, there's enormous pressure to produce results that please whoever is paying the bills. I've often been subtly, or not so subtly, urged to repeat experiments until I achieve the desired outcome. No one directly tells you to falsify data, but they'll imply that your work is flawed or that you must have made a mistake. So you do it again and again until the right results show up. Looking at raw data, I can usually tell if someone is cooking the books or dry labbing, fabricating data, but proving it is nearly impossible. One telltale sign is workload. If you're working hard 12-hour days and your colleague spends most of their time reading magazines, something is probably off. The problem is that fabricating data is so easy that even with a full camera crew watching a lab worker, they could still fake results without getting caught. There are legitimate methods to detect fraud, like statistical analysis and blind samples verified independently. Unfortunately, these are almost never used. Story 12. I'm another scientist, and what was described earlier barely scratches the surface of the problem. In academia, the pressure to publish or perish is immense. Many experiments don't pan out, and sometimes they're complete failures that can't be published. But then there are the experiments that only kind of fail. This is where things get tricky. For example, if you remove certain animals from your study, you might suddenly find a statistical effect. Or if some of your data contradicts the result you need, you can simply exclude those measures, pretend you never collected them, and hope the reviewers don't ask for it. Even when showing representative data, like tissue samples, no one uses truly representative images. Instead, researchers cherry-pick the best, most exaggerated samples to present as if they represent the whole study. For example, if most tissue samples are damaged or show little difference in staining, researchers might show pristine slices that emphasize clear distinctions. There's also a tendency to use euphemisms to report data that isn't statistically significant. For instance, if a result narrowly misses the p less than or equal to 0.05 cutoff for significance, it might still be included with language like approaches significance, even though it technically isn't valid. Ignorance and incompetence compound these issues. Many scientists use inappropriate statistical tests simply because they don't know better. Mistakes are also rampant in studies, especially when undergrads perform much of the grunt work. Often the lead researcher isn't even aware of these errors because students don't want to admit they botched an experiment. And this is just in developed nations with stricter ethical standards. In places like China, outright data fabrication is reportedly rampant and far more brazen. Story 13. I used to work for a company that handled medical transcription, OCR, and data storage. The software they created had a built-in time bomb designed to ensure customers stayed in contact and kept up with payments. After a certain period, an error message would appear. Database corruption located. Please contact support for a rebuild code. Error code XXXXXXX. When customers called, a small app on each technician's desktop allowed us to control how long the fix would last. If the customer was in good standing, we could set the code to prevent the error for 90+ days. But if they were behind on payments, the fix might only last a week. One customer, who was 3 months behind on maintenance payments, received the error message every 2 days. Eventually, he gave in, paid up, and, surprise, the errors magically stopped. We also had a way to completely remove the time bomb for customers who chose not to renew. However, their contract included a massive penalty for rejoining. Additionally, the software frequently required updates, even for minor changes like new printers or fonts. If your maintenance contract lapsed, rejoining required paying 1.5 times the standard cost for the time you were unsubscribed. When I worked there, maintenance cost $1,000 per month on an ad hoc basis, with a 50% discount for annual contracts. If you lapsed for 4 months, you'd have to pay $6,000, plus the first month's $1,000 fee to renew. The company also used proprietary database structures. While they offered custom imports for data from competitors, exporting your data came with exorbitant fees. Story 14. I work in IT security for a massive banking and real estate company. If shareholders, clients, or customers knew how often personal identifiable information, PII, was mishandled or outright stolen, they'd riot. The main problem? Executives. These people are shockingly careless and often think the rules don't apply to them. For example, while the rest of the company follows strict password policies, I've seen directors brag about having passwords that never expire, like their dog's name. PII is supposed to be stored on encrypted media. Yet a director once lost an unencrypted thumb drive containing confidential real estate data worth billions of dollars. The worst incident happened shortly after I joined the company. A high-level executive left his laptop logged in and unattended at a trendy coffee shop while he went to the bathroom. The laptop, which had access to internal market data that could severely impact the American economy, was stolen. The executive wasn't even reprimanded. If the company suspects a breach might become public knowledge, they'll make an announcement. But this only happens in 1 out of every 15 to 20 incidents. Corporate espionage is real, and I've been involved in several cases. It wouldn't be so rampant if executives weren't such reckless, entitled individuals who seem more interested in their egos than in protecting the company or its clients. Honestly, I'm considering changing careers. Story 15. This isn't about a company, but law schools in the United States. In the past, going to a Tier 1 law school and doing reasonably well almost guaranteed a lucrative career. Many graduates earned $200,000 right out of school. As a result, law schools became cash cows for universities. They started opening at an alarming rate, charging outrageous tuition fees. Most of the revenue went straight back to the university's main campuses. It didn't matter because students were getting high-paying jobs after graduation. Then the legal market collapsed alongside the housing market. Law firms rescinded offers, fired employees en masse, or shut down completely. Even as the economy recovered, the legal market didn't bounce back to its former glory. Law firms realized they didn't need massive teams of in-house attorneys. Instead, they started relying on contract agencies. It was cheaper, eliminated overhead and benefits costs, and gave them flexibility to hire attorneys only when big cases came up. Before this shift, contract attorneys earned well, often making upwards of $100 an hour. These short-term gigs allowed them to pay off bills, save money, and take breaks between jobs. But now with so many law school graduates flooding the market, pay for these jobs has plummeted. Some attorneys burdened with $200,000 or more in student loan debt are taking jobs that pay as little as $18 an hour. Adding insult to injury, contract agencies frequently lie to contractors, claiming projects will last months only to end them after a couple of weeks. There's no stability. If you don't work, you don't get paid. While the market may be adjusting, law schools remain profit machines. Applications dip briefly, but are now higher than ever. Schools continue to lure students with promises of high salaries and comfortable jobs, despite the bleak realities of the legal market. Universities and for-profit colleges happily pocket tuition money and send graduates into the world with no job prospects and mountains of debt. Story 16. Throwaway account because I'm about to rant. Apple has been cutting costs by severely limiting the number of chat and phone support advisors available at any given time. This forces customers to endure long wait times. Once they finally get through, they might be connected with someone Apple trained, or they might get an outsourced advisor who receives subpar training. If the latter, their issue likely won't be resolved, leading to another frustrated call or chat. Apple used to limit chat advisors to 2 simultaneous chats, but now they've increased it to 3. That third chat feels like an entirely new job on top of the existing workload. The change caused so much backlash that Apple had to temporarily pause the practice while hiring more outsourced employees to handle the waiting volume. Apple likes to boast about its customer satisfaction, but in the past 6 to 8 months, it's become a turnaround mill. Advisors are no longer encouraged to focus on solving your issue. They're instructed to get you out of the queue as quickly as possible because every minute costs the company money. Here's an insider tip. Most of the information advisors use to troubleshoot your device is already online. In fact, you can solve almost any issue by restarting your phone, resetting settings, or backing it up and restoring it. If those steps don't work, skip chat and phone support entirely. Set up an in-store appointment because it's likely a hardware issue. To summarize, Apple forces customers to wait forever for subpar service, only to receive the same generic troubleshooting steps they could have found online. Story 17. I worked for an organization that operated group homes for youth. These were kids apprehended by the government from their parents and placed in the company's care. The company was paid per diem for each child. While most similar agencies in the area were nonprofit organizations dedicated to actually helping at-risk youth, this company was all about profit. They paid terrible wages, attracting poorly qualified staff. Paychecks often bounced, and payroll errors always seemed to benefit the company. They also invested no money in employee training programs, resulting in high turnover as skilled employees quickly found better jobs. The quality of care provided to the kids barely met minimum standards. The homes and furniture were in poor condition, the food was highly processed and unhealthy, and the vehicles used to transport the youth were falling apart. Staff weren't well trained, leading to major ethical issues like inappropriate boundaries. Youth couldn't form therapeutic relationships with staff because employees were constantly quitting. Privacy was a joke. Staff were expected to use personal email accounts to send and receive sensitive information. Documents weren't shredded, and passwords for the case management system were weak. The company would also take in highly suicidal, self-harming, or aggressive youth simply because the government paid more for these cases, even when it was clear they needed more secure housing. Of course, the company referred these youth to its in-house clinicians, charging the government up to $180 an hour for therapy sessions. Many kids were on as many as a dozen medications. Meanwhile, the owner was driving $100,000 cars and living in a $2 million home. Story 18. I used to work for Google, starting as a wide-eyed idealist and leaving by choice as a disillusioned pragmatist. Google's primary objective is simple: to increase its stock value. Everything revolves around this. If an idea doesn't make the stock more valuable, it gets shelved, forgotten, or canceled, even if it's groundbreaking or could genuinely improve the world. The company is filled with brilliant people who come up with incredible ideas, ranging from simple product improvements to ambitious moonshots. Unfortunately, most of these ideas never materialize because they don't serve the company's stock price. Here's how Google operates. Every year, Google holds an event called Google I/O, where it announces new features, products, and innovations. Behind the scenes, the cycle is predictable. For most of the year, progress is slow, with employees coasting, collecting six-figure salaries, and doing the bare minimum. About 2 months before Google I/O, panic sets in. Teams scramble to create impressive demos for the event. These demos are often held together by duct tape and prayers, barely functional but good enough for a scripted 5-minute presentation. After the event, there's a period of stress as leadership evaluates the press response and how it impacts the stock price. Then comes the reorganization, where teams are dissolved, resources are shuffled, and employees are fired or reassigned. Afterward, it's back to coasting until the next I/O crunch. Many of the amazing projects announced at Google I/O never move forward or progress at a snail's pace. The company can afford to waste millions on poorly managed projects because a tiny percentage of them generate massive returns. Google, like other tech companies, also hires top talent at high salaries, simply to keep them away from competitors. Some employees, myself included, spent months doing absolutely nothing because the company just wanted us on standby. After a few years, I quit to preserve my mental health and regain a sense of purpose. Story 19. This isn't a job I worked at, but it's a nearly universal not-gonna-tell-you secret. If you have moles or other burrowing rodents in your yard, you'll find plenty of products that claim to repel them. They don't work. You can try killing them, but new ones will just move in. It's like a vacant house waiting for new tenants. Eventually, you'll call a pro who will trap them, charge a per-carcass fee, and insist on returning every few months for the rest of your life. But here's the actual solution. The rodents are in your yard because there's something they're eating, like grubs or cranefly larvae. Treat your yard with insect killer to eliminate their food source, and they'll leave. Exterminators won't tell you this because it cuts into their recurring revenue. If you fix the problem, they lose their steady paycheck. Story 20. Police officer here. If you get a ticket, plead not guilty and request a court date. When your court date gets close, ask for a continuance. This will usually push the date back by months. Keep repeating this process as long as the court allows. Over time, years may pass, and the officer who issued the ticket might quit, get fired, or simply forget the details of the incident. If the officer can't recall the specifics, the ticket will likely get dismissed. I've had cases where tickets came to trial 3 or more years after they were issued. By that point, I couldn't remember anything about them, and the cases were dismissed. Also, getting a ticket doesn't always mean you'll have to pay the full fine. Many city attorneys will let you plead to a lesser charge because they don't want to go to trial. For example, a $200 red light ticket with points that could raise your insurance? You might be able to plead down to a $25 seatbelt violation with no points. This happens every single day. One more tip. When we say you have the right to remain silent, take that advice. Story 21. I worked for a rental car company right out of college. Let me tell you, the insurance they sell is a total scam. The damage waiver is somewhat legit because it legally prevents the company from charging you for damages. But the medical and liability insurance? Completely unnecessary. Your own car insurance already covers that. Since you're legally required to have insurance to drive a car anyway, the coverage they sell is pure profit. That's why employees are judged on how much of that useless insurance they sell. To trick you, they'll only quote the daily cost because if they told you the total for a 2-week rental, you'd never buy it. The worst part is the management's approach to selling insurance. They verbally encourage employees to target specific minorities, assuming they don't understand money, math, or insurance concepts. They never put this policy in writing, so they can't be sued, but they criticize employees who don't push hard enough with certain customers. Rental car companies are essentially racist rip-off artists who reward their employees for exploiting people. I'm glad I quit that job. Story 22. Call center worker here. If the agent sounds like they don't care, it's probably because they're burnt out. You can make their day better by just being nice and cooperative, no matter how annoyed you are. Most of us are paid peanuts to sit for 8 hours listening to back-to-back calls filled with complaints and abuse. We're micromanaged to the extreme. Can't even take a bathroom break without logging it, and you'll get scolded if you're late by 26 seconds. Working in tech support call centers is even worse. Customers usually have no idea what they're doing, yet act entitled and blame us for their mistakes. Half the time, their issue could have been solved by reading the manual or using Google. When you're waiting to speak to someone, it's because we're already dealing with other calls. Complaining about the wait time just slows things down further. And no, we're not sitting around playing games. We're being watched constantly. The truth is, call center management doesn't care about its employees, only about keeping customers happy. Agents burn out fast because they're treated like numbers on a report, juggling a ridiculous workload and dealing with rude, entitled callers all day. For the love of all that's decent, have some respect for call center agents. Most people have no idea how soul-crushing this job is. Story 23. Most of the things you think are automated are actually done manually by people like me, sifting through a broken back-end system. Our exchange system constantly messes up, often costing customers $50 or more in erroneous charges for items the system incorrectly marks as kept. Refunds are also unreliable. Just yesterday, I noticed a customer who was overcharged for an exchange and wasn't refunded for her return. We owed her $200, and I was the only person who noticed or cared enough to fix it. Our dev team once deployed a fix that ended up triple charging customers. On top of that, our company's leadership is horrible. They despise women above a size 2, have no respect for poor people, and only care about women's body image when it makes them money. It's gross. Story 24. Former car salesman for a GM certified dealership here. Let's start with sales. A salesperson's job is to get every penny they can from you. They'll say whatever it takes to keep you from discussing price until they've gone through the entire vehicle demonstration. You've taken a test drive, and you've told them that you'll buy if the price is right. Now about money. Just like in retail, when a dealership has a sale, it's almost always not a real sale. When a salesperson asks what monthly payment you can afford, tell them $75 less than your actual limit. Why? Because they'll immediately push you toward a car that costs at least $50 more per month than you said you could afford. If a car is listed for $10,000, the dealership probably only has about $5,000 in it. Never tell a dealer how much you want for your trade-in until you've seen the final price of the car you want to buy. Why? If you say you want $5,000 for your car, they'll show you paperwork that gives you that amount, while secretly increasing the price of the car you're buying by $3,000. The paperwork will also include a code showing the real trade-in value of your car. For example, my dealership used the word Black Horse as a code for numbers 0 to 9. So if the code on the sheet was CBBBB, it meant we were actually giving you $3,000 for your trade, even if the paper said $5,000. I did this to so many people. Sorry, I was a prick. Never finance through the dealership. While the saying money talks might apply in some places, not here. Dealerships prefer you to finance through them because it makes them more money. Here's how. The finance manager sends your loan to the bank, which offers a 2% interest rate. The dealership then adds another 2% to your loan, making extra profit off your payments. That extra 2% stays with the dealership for the life of your loan. This is just scratching the surface of how dealerships operate. Good luck car shopping, and don't trust anyone, not even a friend or family member if they work at a dealership. They're chasing that commission check, trust me. Story 25. I worked at multiple dry cleaners after college. If something was pressed and wrinkle-free, it could easily pass as clean. When we ran out of time to actually dry clean or launder items, this was our go-to solution. Now I work at a fulfillment center for a hugely popular online retailer. I've been cross-trained in every outbound department, so I've seen it all. Here's the truth. No one cares about your order. The only priority is getting it out on time. If something is noticeably damaged and we think you'll return it, we might replace it with a less damaged item. Other than that, speed is the name of the game, not quality. We're rough with items, tossing and dropping them regularly. Also, our hands are filthy as we handle your packages. Most workers wear the cheap gloves the company provides, but they're only clean for the first hour of wear. After that, they're just as dirty as bare hands. So the next time you order something online, just know, it's been through a lot before it reaches your doorstep. Story 26. My mom has worked for the federal government for 34 years, handling what I call TPS reports, like in office space. These reports detail expenditures of tax dollars, down to the smallest items like nails. On paper, it's a great idea. Detailed oversight of every expense. Here's the catch. Those nails? They're budgeted at $5 each. And of course, you can't use those nails without a $100 hammer. Contractors working with the federal government know there's no real oversight on these expenses. Federal law limits contracts to specific companies, and those companies charge whatever they want. My mom, like many others, just does the bare minimum to avoid issues with her 3 managers and keeps the system rolling. It's essentially office space in real life. Want more insider info? The federal government keeps all employee records, yes, all, in underground caves in Illinois. My mom has had colleagues retire and wait up to 2 years to start receiving their pensions. Why? The process involves employees literally walking around these caves, collecting paper documents needed to process retirement benefits. The caves are used because paper deteriorates more slowly underground. And yes, I once saw an article about the caves, but it mysteriously disappeared. They hold files for all federal employees, detailing their entire careers. Meanwhile, the building my mom works in has mold, lead paint, and asbestos. They've known about these issues for decades, but only recently started fixing them. Employees were even told in a meeting to keep quiet about these conditions. One more thing. Whenever someone gets a new position or promotion, they receive a budget to redo their office. For example, judges get up to $45,000 to redecorate their chambers. They can spend it on flat screens, furniture, whatever they want, as long as the money is used up. To summarize, the federal government grossly overpays for supplies, stores sensitive records in caves, and lets employees work in unsafe conditions for decades. Oh, and judges get a free shopping spree with taxpayer money. Also, the cave work environment has led to high suicide rates in the town where these records are kept because working in a cave all day is so depressing. So, yeah, caves. Story 27. Fine dining and bartending secrets. Fine dining. If you want to move up the wait list at a fancy restaurant, tip the hostess. Bartending. It's better to buy a shot of vodka and a can of Red Bull separately than to order a vodka Red Bull. It's more cost-effective. Those test tube shots, tutors, contain little to no actual liquor, and the liquor is usually just schnapps. Don't get mad at the server. Bartenders are often forced to sell them. If you're a habitually bad tipper, don't expect a good drink. We'll barely put any liquor in it, maybe a bit at the bottom, or just pour some in the straw so you think it's stronger than it is. On the flip side, start the night with a great tip, and you'll likely get heavier pours and faster service. Wine drinkers. Tip on the full bill, including the cost of wine. Your server has to tip out based on the total bill, so if you stiff them on the wine, you're taking money out of their pocket. Restaurant secret. It's okay to send back over or undercooked food in a nice restaurant. Your server just wants you to have a great meal. We don't spit in your food or anything ridiculous like that. Pro tip. When dining at a very nice restaurant, buy a drink for the kitchen staff. Tell the chef to decide who gets it. Line cooks, sous chefs, anyone. These people work insane hours, often 80+ per week. Rarely get weekends or holidays off. and make salaries that barely compare to hourly tipped workers. The gesture usually results in off-menu items sent your way and exceptional service. And no, they don't order expensive drinks. It's usually a beer or a simple whiskey. A little kindness goes a long way, and it's a way to show appreciation for some of the hardest workers in the industry. Story 28. I work as a water plant operator for a local utility. The water that comes out of your tap is clean and safe to drink. Much cleaner than the raw water we pull from the river, but it's not pure. Truly purifying water requires boiling it for an extended period, which isn't cost-effective. What we do is treat water to make it safe. Our treated water contains chlorine, which kills harmful bacteria that can cause diseases. While some bacteria do get through, they're harmless. What really gets me is how many people refuse to drink tap water, including my wife, who only drinks the filtered water from our refrigerator. That's honestly a joke. I drink tap water all the time and have no issues. The irony is that the bottled water people think is pure is often less regulated than tap water. Bottling companies don't have the same strict standards we do. They literally take spring water, bottle it, and call it pure. We operate a plant that uses spring water, and even we have to treat it. One time, a deer died near the top of the hill where our spring is located, and we had to shut down the entire plant because the water was contaminated. Bottling companies, they don't care nearly as much. Story 29. I used to work for UPS as a package sorter. While there are rules and procedures in place to keep your packages safe, once a package weighs over 70 pounds, all those procedures go out the window. I've lost count of how many times I've seen heavy packages drop 3 to 4 feet to the ground. If you've ever received a package with missing or broken items, it's probably not the shipper's fault. It's UPS. After working for hours without breaks, people get tired and stop caring. To speed things up, packages are literally flung into bins. If the bin is low and the package is large, it gets dropped and sometimes even kicked into place. If something breaks, we might tell a supervisor, but they usually just shrug and say, "I'll take care of it," and then do nothing. Sometimes packages arrive at my area already opened. We're supposed to reseal them and sort them like normal, and technically, we should check the contents against the invoice. But most people don't bother. They just tape the box and move on. As for the drivers, the rumors are true. Some are fantastic people, but many are lazy and will slap a "you weren't home" slip on your door without even knocking. They make great money and often do the bare minimum. If you're shopping online and ordering something expensive, fragile, or important, I strongly recommend choosing a different shipping company. I've seen people steal everything from Jordans to cell phones to cosmetics. Once, someone even stole a gun from a package, leading to a hub lockdown. That person got caught, but many others get away with it. Story 30. I used to work as a brand marketing intern for a Fortune 50 oil company. This company had 2 gas station brands, one that was in-house and fully managed by the company, and the other that was franchised. The in-house brand used wholesale gasoline, not any different from branded gasoline, had lower operating costs thanks to its vertically integrated management system, and boasted nicer facilities because it was directly managed by the company. Here's what the company did. They targeted a group of people in the industry referred to as New Americans. This typically meant foreigners, often from Pakistan, who were eager and happy for the chance to own their own business. What these franchise owners didn't realize was that the company had a specific strategy to squeeze them out. First, the company used franchise locations as test markets for their in-house brand. If a franchise on a particular corner performed exceptionally well, the company would open an in-house station right across the street. Then brand marketers like me were sent to evaluate the franchise stores and provide a list of renovations or improvements they needed to make out of their own pockets to comply with company standards. If the franchise owner couldn't or wouldn't comply, the company would undercut them by lowering the gas prices at their in-house station across the street. Because the in-house brand had larger profit margins due to economies of scale and lower operating costs, they could afford to take a temporary hit. The franchise owners, already cash-strapped, couldn't compete and would eventually go out of business. When that happened, the company's in-house brand would absorb all the business and profits from the now-defunct franchise. On top of this, full-time employees were required to volunteer for the company's Republican-backed super PAC each month. It wasn't optional, though they framed it as if it was. The strangest part? No one at the company seemed to have an issue with any of this. Everyone was drinking the Kool-Aid, and I've never felt like more of an outsider in a job. Story 31. I used to sell cell phones, mostly prepaid ones. But I learned quickly that all the major cell phone companies, AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, rip you off if your plan has a minute allowance. Here's how it works. If your plan allows 500 minutes, any call you make will deduct at least 1 minute from your allowance, even if it's only a 10-second call. That means you lose 50 seconds of the minute you paid for. If you make a call that's 121 seconds long, 2 minutes and 1 second, the company rounds up and charges you for 3 minutes. This rounding system is one of the biggest scams in the cell phone industry. If you think this isn't a big deal, consider this. With a 500-minute plan, 30,000 seconds, you could technically burn through all your minutes with only 500 seconds of calls. That's a 98% loss of the minutes you paid for, all because of rounding. Good luck asking your phone company for a 98% discount on those calls. Instead, I recommend using alternatives like Google Hangouts to make free calls wherever possible. Story 32. I'm a QA inspector for a major commercial aircraft supplier. Recently, to cut costs and increase production, we implemented a process where workers inspect their own work. On paper, it sounds great. Workers take ownership of their tasks, which should lead to more pride in their work and fewer errors. In reality, it doesn't work that way. Before this system, the engineering group responsible for reviewing rejected work always had a backlog. Almost overnight after this change, their workload disappeared. Now, either the workers suddenly became perfect and stopped making mistakes, unlikely, or they're making mistakes and simply not reporting them because they can approve their own work. This isn't unique to our company. Most commercial and general aviation manufacturers have adopted similar processes. It's a cost-cutting measure that looks good in theory, but compromises accountability and potentially safety. Story 33. I'm a hospital nurse, and I've seen firsthand how for-profit hospitals prioritize money over patient health and safety. I've watched patients die because the hospital refused to spend the money necessary to save their lives. Brand new nurses are hired at low wages, barely trained because the experienced nurses are already overwhelmed, and then left to work independently while dangerously underqualified. We were also forced to lie on paperwork every shift, signing off that we were in every patient's room every hour. It's physically impossible when you're assigned 7 patients, but failure to comply meant risking your job. This way, if something went wrong, the hospital could shift the blame to the nurse for falsifying records instead of admitting to dangerous understaffing. Not-for-profit hospitals have a lower mortality rate for a reason. While there may be some great for-profit facilities out there, I believe stories like mine are sadly far more common. Story 34. My brother-in-law owns a small business selling artisanal products to pretentious yuppies and hipsters. His inventory includes soaps, bath accessories, shaving products, and conditioners. Recently, he added a line of food items, which has been hugely successful. He sources these products from third-world suppliers, marks them up by 600% or more, and makes a fortune. His primary customers are status-obsessed individuals who buy them solely because of the artisanal label. He opened his first store in Austin in 2013 and now has 3 locations there, plus 1 in San Antonio. Customers willingly pay obscene prices for poorly crafted products made with questionable ingredients under uncertain conditions, all because of clever marketing, branding, and presentation. The psychology behind it is fascinating. The music and scent in his stores are carefully curated to influence customers. For example, a woman once spent $700 on soaps and lotions because she liked the music playing in the store. She even offered the clerk money to find out the artist. Now she regularly visits the store and asks to hear that same music. She can't. It's streamed in. My brother-in-law laughs about how these affluent customers fall for it and recounts stories about their quirks and neediness. But as long as they keep buying, his business will keep thriving. Story 35. I work for Publix, a huge grocery chain that takes pride in how much it donates to the United Way every year. While this sounds great on the surface, there's a lot of pressure placed on employees to donate, and it gets worse every year. Managers hold one-on-one meetings with employees to pressure them into increasing their donations. Imagine making $10 to $12 an hour and being pushed to donate more money every year. It's tough. On top of that, donating has become tied to career advancement. There's even a donation tier called the Managers Club. If you want to be promoted to assistant manager, you're subtly, or not so subtly, encouraged to donate at that level. This was used against me when I was aiming for a promotion. But it gets worse. Store managers, desperate to meet their donation quotas, pressure associates into pledging large weekly amounts. They reassure employees that they can lower the amount at the beginning of the next year before the deductions kick in. For example, I agreed to donate $25 per week in August, which added up to $1,300 toward the company's goal. That amount was recorded and touted as part of the company's total donations. However, when January came around, I lowered my contribution to $5 per week, as did many other associates. This means that Publix brags about donation numbers that aren't accurate, as they include pledges that employees revise before the money is actually taken out. It's incredibly dishonest. Story 36. I'm surprised no one has mentioned Starbucks yet, so here's some insider info. Promotions and new products. Many Starbucks promotions are just ways to use leftover products from previous campaigns. For example, those new trifle desserts served in tiny 10-ounce cups. Those cups were leftover from the mini Frappuccino promotion. Corporate decided to repurpose them by throwing pre-existing ingredients into the cups and marketing them as a dessert. The berry sangria drink. That's just a way to use up the red raspberry syrup after corporate removed the artificial red dye. They used it as an ingredient in the sangria syrup and the oranges in the drink. Leftovers from the discontinued Valencia orange refresher. Essentially, many new drinks are just creative ways to avoid waste and use up leftover stock. The mystery of green coffee extract. Starbucks is very transparent about where their coffee beans come from, how they're roasted, and other details about the coffee supply chain. However, the green coffee extract used in their refreshers, the pink drink, dragon drink, etc., is a mystery. Starbucks has never disclosed the process of extracting it, what exactly it is, or where it comes from. Even managers who tried to dig for answers couldn't figure it out. Story 37. Here's some insider info for DirecTV customers. If you've been a customer for 1 to 12 months, you're not eligible for much. The most you'll likely get is a free service call, which is covered under the 1-year guarantee. If you've been a customer for 1 to 2 years, you become eligible for discounted or free programming offers, typically offered to resolve technical issues. If you've recently called in to complain about a problem, you're more likely to receive these offers. But don't overuse this strategy. DirecTV tracks customers who repeatedly try to exploit the system and may flag you as a fraud shopper. If you've been a customer for 2 to 4 years, you qualify for a free receiver upgrade every year, including HD DVRs. If a representative tells you otherwise, they're wrong. However, taking the upgrade requires extending your contract for another 24 months. Make sure you're ready to commit before accepting. If you've been a customer for 5+ years, you're eligible for almost every available offer because DirecTV values your loyalty. This includes discounts, free upgrades, and more. Combined programming offers. DirecTV rarely promotes combined movie packages proactively, so it's up to you to find and take advantage of them. For example, instead of paying $116 per month for the Premier package, which includes all movie channels, you could downgrade to the Choice Extra package, $65 per month, and add 2-for-1 movie packages. A few years ago, this setup would cost around $92 a month, saving you $24 a month. The key is to monitor promotions on DirecTV's website because they don't send flyers or emails for every deal. Check regularly, and eventually you'll find something worthwhile. The bottom line, DirecTV's packages are designed to maximize profits while covering the royalties they pay to other companies for their channels. Promotions exist for your benefit, but you have to do the work to find them. Story 38. I've worked at PetSmart for over a year, and while my store might be particularly bad, it's still heartbreaking to see what happens to the animals behind the scenes. The animals you see out on the floor aren't the only ones in the store. There's a section in the back called ISO, where surplus animals and sick ones are kept. Many of these animals have ringworm or other diseases, and they're kept in plastic storage tubs, the kind you'd use to organize your house, with holes cut into the lids for ventilation. Small animals like hamsters, mice, and fish die by the dozens, and no one really cares. It's just part of the day-to-day operations. As for the pricing, if you see a new low price sticker next to a bag of food, it doesn't mean the price has gone down. It usually means the price has gone up, but the sticker tricks customers into thinking they're getting a deal. Damaged or returned items? They often get tossed back on the shelves at the end of the day without much inspection. Overall, it's a big corporate-run mess, and I feel especially bad for the animals caught in the middle of it. Story 39. I used to work for a solar company that had a line of malfunctioning panels. The tech support team first noticed the issue, but management ignored them when they raised concerns. Then a customer reported that their boat caught on fire because of these panels. Even after that, sales and tech support begged management to stop selling them, but the company refused. They didn't want to take the financial hit of scrapping the inventory. Instead, they attempted a makeshift fix using a piece of metal and 3M tape as a heat sink. Unsurprisingly, this didn't work. The panels continued to malfunction, leading to more complaints about burning holes and scorched property. I couldn't stay with a company that had no morals and only cared about the bottom line, so I left shortly after. Sadly, this kind of behavior seems to be the norm for many businesses in the US. So finding a truly ethical workplace feels like an uphill battle. Story 40. I work at an RV factory during the summer, where our plant makes B-class vans. We're currently the market leader. But let me tell you, the quality is highly questionable. I handle parts and walk around the entire plant, so I hear and see a lot. The wiring, plumbing, and other complicated systems in the vans are slapped together as quickly as possible to keep the production line moving. More often than not, the plumbing leaks or the wiring shorts out and melts when the vans are tested at the end of the line. One of the leads tried to explain to a worker the importance of wiring things correctly and following the schematics. The worker had been wiring things incorrectly for years, and their approach was extremely dangerous. While it didn't show issues immediately, it could lead to small explosions or fires later down the road. The worker's response? I don't care, the lights still turn on. The factory's focus is entirely on pumping out as many units as possible to meet quarterly goals. Quality doesn't matter. If we don't hit the goal, management doesn't get their bonus checks. Story 41. I used to work as a wildlife control technician, handling nuisance animals like raccoons in attics, squirrels in vents, or skunks wandering into yards. While the job wasn't bad overall, there was a dark side to it. By state law, we had to euthanize every animal we trapped. We lied to customers, telling them the animals would be released or taken to sanctuaries. In reality, we gave the animals a shot, put them in a freezer, and when the freezer was full, we dumped them in a landfill. The business made most of its profit not from solving wildlife issues, but from selling and installing animal-proofing products like guards and barriers. We would first pitch these products to homeowners, claiming they'd keep animals out of attics or other spaces. The problem? If you lock a raccoon out of its nest, it'll just tear another hole in the roof or find another way in. This meant customers had to call us back and pay for more services. If you ever need wildlife removal, know that these companies can be trusted to solve your problem, but don't expect them to take the animals to a sanctuary. Also, don't buy any animal-proofing products until the animal's actually gone. I didn't stay with that company for long, and I deeply regret working there. Their actions didn't align with my values, and the way we treated the animals was heartbreaking.